This is the final part of the Israelites' actual physical exit from the country of Egypt and covers Exodus chapters 13 to 16. It opens up with some, it seems very keen on God's part that the plagues and everything are commemorated. There's a lot of instructions on how to commemorate the event, and clearly it seems to be set up as the intention of that big statement is for that to pass down the generations. Which, to be fair, if it's true, then we're talking about it still three and a bit thousand years later. So good job there. God is leading the Israelites away from wherever it was they were, Goshen, I think it was, in Egypt. So they're still in Egypt, but they're making their way away from where the Pharaoh is. And it said that he's leading them by day, taking the form of a cloud. Saw some of those today, and yeah. And by night, a big pillar of fire in the sky, somewhat less ambiguous than a cloud during the day. Again, though, we're back to the theme that God hardens the Pharaoh's heart, pushing the Pharaoh to then come after the Israelites, having changed his mind about having let them go. So the Egyptian army comes after the Israelites and ends up backing them into a corner, so the Israelites are stuck with, theoretically, the Red Sea behind them and the Egyptian army in front of them, and nowhere to go. God then tells Moses to stretch out his hand and hold up his staff, and then it said that an easterly wind blows throughout the night and gradually recedes the waters of the Red Sea. This seems to take some time, but the Israelites then go through at night. The Egyptians then follow them. It says that God bungs up their chariots and all the rest of it. Silt, do you think, may have something to do with that? If you've got a parted sea, it would be quite muddy, you'd think. And then God crashes all the waters back over the Egyptians after the Israelites were on the other side and safe, and it states that all of the Egyptians are killed. It's unambiguous about this parting of the Red Sea. I thought maybe it was just, it could be interpreted as the tide went out and all the rest of it. But no, it does actually state there was a wall of water on the left and the right as the Israelites went through the middle of it. Most of chapter 15 is then a big old song about the joys of God kicking the crap out of the Egyptians and how wonderful all that is. And interestingly, there's the first mention of God's unfailing love. I think that's actually the first mention of God having a sense of love for people. I might have got that wrong, but I don't recall that, because that somewhat leapt out at me. Like, right, okay, we're not just rules and punishment and frustration. There's actually a softer theme there as well. Once the Israelites are officially out of Egypt, so they've gone through the Red Sea, they're on the other side, whatever was on the other side at that point, sea's come back, squashed all the Egyptians. There's now 600,000 people, the Israelites, wandering around looking for some water. It takes them 3 days apparently to find any, but I guess they're going to need a lot of it. And when they do eventually find some, it's said that it's bitter. So the Israelites grumble, which is a bit of a theme in this part of the story, certainly a lot of grumbling. To be fair, rough week. And God says to Moses, get that stick over there, or log, whatever it is, throw it in the water, and that purifies it and everyone gets a drink. It's interesting that there always needs to be something done. It's never just abracadabra, fresh water. It's get that thing, almost an arbitrary act that then seems to symbolise something. And I don't know if I'm missing something there. It feels like there could be some sort of meaning in that, because that's very much a recurring theme. God at this point says, basically, do what's right, follow the rules, do as I ask you to do, and then I will spare you from all the diseases of the Egyptians. It's interesting how it's worded, because it does specifically say you will avoid the diseases of the Egyptians, but it doesn't say you're going to go to heaven or anything. It's just do as you're told and you won't get all the beating that the Egyptians just took. It's a bit of a raw deal. But I guess it's kind of a low bar in terms of all you've got to do is do the right thing and then do what the guy tells you to do. That guy being the one who just dropped 10 plagues on Egypt and then split a sea in half so you could walk through it. I mean, to be fair, if he asks you to do something, you're probably going to do it anyway, aren't you? But there's clearly some concern about this actually happening. Part of that is God saying he's going to test the Israelites for compliance, as it were. And then it's said that in the evening, quail turn up so the Israelites can eat meat. And then in the morning, it's a sort of bread type thing that forms like dew. So Israelites can go out in the morning, harvest this stuff as it were for the day. If they keep it overnight, then it goes stinky and full of maggots. Except on the 6th day, when they can harvest twice as much, and then they're not allowed to do anything on the Sabbath, but they've got enough food for that because they got twice as much the night before. It's very specific, but clearly the Sabbath is very important to God. It's interesting that God says the bread is going to come from heaven, and I think that's the second, maybe, instance of the use of the word heaven. The first one being when God created the heavens and the earth, but that seemed much more sky. This time, heaven sounds like more like the place where God resides, because it's coming down from where he is, but still no suggestion that you do the right thing and that's where you end up. More just this idea that it's coming from the sky and that's a separate place where presumably God lives. The final part is that it just sort of tacks on to the end of chapter 16 that, oh, by the way, the Israelites are in the desert for 40 years. And it sounds like all they have to do is leave Egypt and go to Canaan, which, as I understand it, is basically where Israel/Syria is now. I have actually been to Israel on holiday a long time ago, but I don't think it's moved. And one of the notable things about Egypt was that it's right next door to Israel. So, granted, Egypt is a big place now, but it may have been bigger back then. I appreciate that. But realistically, at the point Moses was around, which was, 3 and a bit thousand years ago, my understanding is that the pyramids of Giza were already built. They are basically in Cairo, which suggests that the centre of civilization for the Egyptian society was near Cairo, at least in the vicinity of Cairo, which also makes sense because that's where the Nile Delta is, and therefore it's where the fertile land is, and a lot of the rest of it is desert, which is not going to be easy to survive in. But basically, if you go from sort of Cairo-ish here to Israel sort of ish here, the Red Sea is down here. So you're going from here. I don't quite understand why there was a need to part the Red Sea. So they would have to have gone quite substantially south. And even if they went to the absolute southernmost point of the Red Sea and crossed there, which is narrow to be fair, so that might make some sense, it's then only 1,500 miles from that point up to where roughly Canaan was supposed to be. I mean, if you're walking at 3 miles an hour, that's only 500 hours. You know, you could walk for a couple of hours a day or a few hours a day and have that done in 6 months. But no, it's 40 years of manna and quail, presumably wandering around in the desert. I assume it can't possibly be that they were just lost and couldn't find it. I mean, just head north and follow the coast around. It was even I could do that, and I've got a terrible sense of direction. So my assumption is that something must have been going on in that 40 years that was purposeful. Hopefully we're going to find out what that was in the rest of the book. But for now, it's a slightly odd thing, compounded by the slightly odd thing that it looks as if there was no particular need to have crossed the Red Sea because it's in the wrong place. So, presuming there's an element of misunderstanding in terms of geography. But yeah, again, clearly narration getting out. I don't think that's intended to be metaphorical. Again, that does seem like that's suggesting as being a big supernatural event. I suppose in this case that's a prime candidate for where it could easily have been exaggerated. But even so, I don't quite get how do you through the middle. I don't know. Difficult to know what to do with that one. The takeaways anyway, I guess, are God is getting his people out of Egypt. He's very keen that everyone knows that he is God and that the Egyptian ones are not God, and that what he did with the terms of the plagues and all the rest of it is commemorated. So I think we'll just go on and see what's next, because I'm pretty sure that's back-to-back cop-outs in terms of what do I think of those. But I think we need more context. We'll move on anyway and see what comes next, and hopefully in the bigger picture this will all make a bit more sense.